Hi guys, Aris Hardware Buster. I initiate the case or chassis category, which is of vast importance since this piece part is among the few that you won't change frequently, along with the power supply and possibly the keyboard. I was not eager, to be frank, to do my first chassis review for Hardware Busters, mainly because I knew that lots of work and time had to be invested to make something that will be up to the high standards that I'm used to. But thanks to sound analysis work that I've already conducted for chassis evaluation for cybernetics mostly, I only needed to implement an accurate methodology for thermal performance, which is something easier said than done eventually. Back to the Shadow Base 800, the basic model, named Shadow Base 800, is available in black and comes with three PureWings 3 140mm PWM fans. The Shadow Base 800DX comes with ARGB LEDs and an ARGB controller in the front panel and is available in black and in white with black highlights. The fans are three PureWings 3 140mm PWM fans as well. And we have the top version, the Shadow Base 800FX, which features the same ARGB front lightings as the DX version, but replaces the three fans with four light winds 140mm PWM fans. An RGB and PWM hub for up to 8 devices is included in both the black and white versions. I have the white Shadow Base 800FX in my hands, which is tough during photo shooting, but looks nice. Be Quiet did a very good job in the last years in the chassis section, cementing its place in this market, besides the other two categories that it is already super active, power supplies and cooling. Thanks to the three different versions, with two of them offered in black or white color, there is a Shadow Base 800 to cover the needs of almost every user out there, from the ones that don't like RGB lit fans to the ones that dream in ARGB. The DX version adds LEDs at the front, while the FX offers better fans and a hub. The Shadow Base 800 chassis are compatible with the HDD KH2 if you want to add more HDD or SSD drives. You can mount up to 2 cages under the PSU shroud in the corresponding mounting frame. The build quality of the case is good. Be Quiet usually doesn't let me down in this section. The build quality is good. Be Quiet usually doesn't let me down in this section. The chassis has large dimensions and the white coloring scheme looks nice, but gives me, as I've already mentioned, a tough time taking photos because of the same color background I used, and this is why I've ordered a black background too. It has three removable dust filters, which will come super handy in an environment with tons of dust. One is at the top side, one at the front, and the last at the bottom. The input-output panel has three USB sockets, with one of them Type-C, a power button, mic and headphone ports. There's also another push button for switching the RGB colors of all parts, with RGB lighting connected to the chassis controller. Unfortunately, there is no reset button. On the front side, Be Quiet has installed three fans and one is on the exhaust side to remove the hot air from the chassis. A complete teardown of the chassis. The side panel behind the mainboard is covered with soundproof material. The PCI slots can rotate to mount vertically the graphics card. You will also need the PCI Express extension cable, which is not provided in the bundle. You will have to buy it separately. The gap behind the mainboard is large, but partially covered by a bracket which holds the PWM and ARGB hub. Speaking of the PWM and ARGB hub, here it is. It has 8 ports in total. 4 of them are already occupied by the pre-installed fans. The hub is powered from the PSU through a SATA connector. The cable management bar is used to hide cables. You can move it to the right if you install a larger mainboard, extended ATX from factory. Right next to it is an SSD bracket which can be removed to install the SSD easier. Assembly. Installing the system inside this chassis is easy since you have lots of space to work. I have to admit that I don't like small dimension chassis because the installation procedure is usually more challenging compared to larger ones. There is enough space around the mainboard to work, But I suggest you connect the EPS cables first. The PSU is installed, as you can see, I used an EVGA 1000 G7, which only measures 130 millimeters long. Yeah, EVGA PSUs. This used to be a thing, I think. I used the Be Quiet Pure Loop 2 FX all-in-one to cool down the processor. And as you can see, I almost fully utilized the PWM ARGB hub with fans. The white graphics card matches the chassis color. The cables behind the mainboard tray, I think I did a pretty good job there. Okay, nobody will see them anyway. And I also installed an SSD to show you how it looks like. And we have the finished system, which looks very nice, especially with the white Galax card inside. And let's go now to the test system. I used the modded Gigabyte X670E Aorus Master as a testing mainboard with 3 thermal probes installed on its VRMs, chipset and NVMe drive. I also monitor the ambient temperature, although I use a climate chamber and have another thermal probe at the PSU's exhaust and one at the chassis exhaust. I obtain the rest of the system temperatures, CPU and GPU, through the custom-made software I use for conducting all thermal measurements. Please note that I use a different system for shooting photos and for noise testing, which you can see in the assembly page, and the system that I just described is used for thermal testing. So yeah, in every chassis I have to install 2 different systems, which is time consuming. I also use a PowerNetics version 2 kit to monitor power consumption and every other important aspect of the system. If you want to look at the testing procedures for noise especially, I suggest you check hwbusters.com and read the full review there. Noise damping results. The chassis has increased noise at low frequencies, but noise drops notably after 2 kHz. Noise damping is notably higher in the unfiltered decibel range, but what matters the most for us is the filtered decibel range, or dBA. And some comparison graphs to provide you with an idea of how the Shadow Base 800FX performs. From 2 to 6 kHz, from 8 to 11 kHz and from 13 to 18 kHz it performs pretty well. And the most important range is from 2 to 6 kHz. Noise damping in the dBA range is not impressive. On the other side, in the dPZ range, where no filter is applied, the Shadow Base achieves an impressive performance. And some noise output results, stock fans and GPU. The low speed fans don't produce high noise even at full speed, remaining below 35 decibels, and the Galax GPU that I used stays below 50 decibels at full speed. Noise output comparison graphs. Although the Phanteks case doesn't have high RPM fans, still its noise output is the highest. This is what I take from this graph. And we also have frequency plots, 50% fan speed graph. The maximum values above 1 kHz frequencies should be ignored since they probably are from external factors. The higher average noise output, the highest average noise output is in the 200 to 500 Hz range. 75% fan speed frequencies, increased levels in the 250 to 500 Hz range. According to several studies, too much noise in this frequency range leads to muffled or boxy sound. Thankfully, we're not talking about music here, but for fans, just for fans spinning. Full fan speed with now we have increased noise in the low mid range from 250 to 500 Hz. So yeah, you got the idea. The fans produce high frequencies, high noise in the frequency range from 250 to 500 Hz. Signal recordings for the same fan speeds, 50, 75 and 100%. I have recorded the signals that you will hear next, but you should keep in mind that I've enabled automatic gain control, or AGC, to make it easier for you to reproduce them. The provided recordings are only offered for oral identification purposes. Thermal performance. Since this is the first chassis review that I have conducted using the new methodology for thermal performance evaluation, I won't provide any comparison with other chassis samples. As I review, of course, more chassis and I will have more data, I will be able to provide comparisons. So wait for future reviews. To save us some time, we will only look at the gaming results here. If you want to also look at the idle and torture results, you can read the full review on hwbusters.com. So, gaming results. The CPU temperature remains almost the same despite the chassis fan speed, so there is no need for you to crank up the chassis fan speed. In the GPU, the difference between full fan speed and 25 decibels is almost 1 degree Celsius, so it is not significant either. For the mainboard VRMs, I recorded 1.3 degrees Celsius difference between full fan speed and 25 decibels, 1.1 degrees for the NVMe and 1.8 degrees Celsius for the chipset. The temperatures don't say the whole truth though, and we have to look at the CPU and GPU frequencies too. Let's do that. In gaming, the chassis full fan speed scenario gave 18 MHz high average CPU speed and 6 MHz in the GPU. Unless you live in the Atari and Amiga years, both these speeds are unimportant. Conclusion. The Big White Shadow Base 800FX goes for 210 euros in the white version, and this variation is the most expensive of the Shadow Base 800 series. What do you get now? 4 quality 140mm fans, light wings, and an 8-port PWM ARGB hub at this price point. Given that each of these fans cost around 30 euros or dollars, and if we also assume that the hub costs around the same, then you can easily see why this product is priced at this point. Yeah, at this price you can look at other options from Fractal Design or Lian Li, but it all depends on what you want to do with the system parts you have in hand. After so many years of building systems, either for me or for others, I strongly believe that the chassis choice has mainly to do with the looks and compatibility with the parts that you want to use. Usually thermal performance is not the first priority for most users, since adding more fans to increase airflow leads to increased heat removal from the chassis. This is a large case, allowing you to build a high-end system with a strong cooling solution, or a massive air cooler, or a large water cooler with up to 420mm radiators. And thanks to the 4 pre-installed fans, the airflow is pretty good, and the provided PWM ARGB hub is a highly welcome feature, allowing you to install many fans without worrying that you were left out of available mainboard headers. Although now it uses noise damping material on one of its 2 sides, the tempered glass and the front mesh panel don't allow for increased noise damping performance. To keep the noise, you have to realize that to keep the noise inside a chassis, you have to tightly insulate it, which will lead to increased operating temperature, since besides noise, you will also trap heat inside it. The best way to keep noise output low is to use quality low-speed fans and make a suitable fan speed profile to control them all. The Shadow Base 800FX is a chassis for high-end systems with large coolers and graphics cards, and if you plan to use it for a mid-level system, you should look for a smaller chassis, else your system will look small inside the large interior of the Shadow Base 800FX. I hope you enjoyed the review. You are welcome to leave your comments, suggestions, since this is the first complete chassis review after many years, I have to admit that I avoided this category because chassis reviews need a lot of time, guys, a lot of time. As I've mentioned, I have to build two different systems inside to take noise and thermal measurements, but I believe that I offered you something unique, especially in the noise measurements. WSNGR, you can order Pownetics kit from there, Discord server, Patreon page if you want to support us, like and subscribe to our channel, and till the next video. Bye bye!